Welcome to a very special installment of Marvel Movie Talk right here on Geekscape. As always, I'm Christian Bladt, and as usual, he is Eric Conner.
Hello, one and all.
And we are very excited to be here from the beautiful studios of Afterbuzz TV in North Hollywood, joined in person by a very special guest, Joseph Culp, who was the first, and I'll say, best on-screen Doctor Doom that we've gotten thus far. And we have to say thus far because we know that there's another Fantastic Four movie in the works.
More to come.
We're going to talk about all of that. But Joseph, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure, Christian.
And this just happened out of dumb luck because we were going to do this via Zoom basically when you were abroad. And then you're like, oh, I'll be in LA next week. I'm like, wait a minute. I know a studio we can use. Let's do that. Well, so I'm very glad that whatever came up overseas kept you from that conversation because it's more fun to do it like this, I think.
I think it is. And it's always great to be in person and in conversation with, live human organisms, not just images.
Rectangle
on the screen.
Yeah.
So
thank you for thinking of us as human organisms.
Yeah. You don't even know us.
I don't even know you yet, but I have the distinct sense that you are, in fact, human organisms that I enjoy.
So there's a number of things in your career I want to touch on, but I want to dive right into the 1994 Roger Corman Fantastic Four because that is why we're here today. And I always like to tell my personal connection to that version of the film, which many people have probably told you, and you've heard these stories. I'd heard about the film was coming. There were a couple of stills. We really didn't see that much at that point because if you didn't buy the right fanzines, you had, you just didn't see them. It wasn't like, hey kids, there was no Google to type in Fantastic Four movie. So, and I heard about it, and then we started to hear that it wasn't going to come out. And I was at a comic book in New York City and a comic book convention in New York City. And I was just sort of looking around, and this was there was a table of VHS, and I had two video cassettes that I couldn't believe were in front of me. Yeah. One was the Star Wars Christmas special, which was also infamous. Which recently I spoke to a filmmaker who made a documentary about that special. That was $20, easy to spend, even though I barely had it. But then there was right next to it the Fantastic Four film, also $20. And I was like, well, I'm not going to get any of the comics I wanted, but I have these two tapes.
You don't need
I didn't need them. And I went home, and I'll have you know, I did deliberate. Which one do you watch first? And I was like, I kind of had a really good vibe for the Star Wars Christmas special because we'd heard so much about it. So I watched it, and I'll tell you, it was exciting to see because there was the animated series, I think from the 70s at this point, which I would see in reruns, and I think at a certain point they got rid of the Human Torch and replaced him with a robot because I think they were afraid of kids setting themselves on fire, and so they had Robbie the Robot as the fourth member, and so I had never seen the Fantastic Four on screen at that point, so it was so exciting to see it. And, we'll get through all of your experience.
More exciting than the Star Wars Christmas special.
Yeah. Which, by the way, was written by Bruce Valanche, so no slouch,
But let's face it, you put it on, you're like, well, okay, it's kind of goofy. Fantastic Four, you put it on like, this is exciting.
Well, and the documentary Doomed has such a different tone than it's a great documentary, by the way, the one about the Star Wars holiday special.
Oh, that one.
And Doomed is great.
Doomed is fantastic.
And Doomed is so positive. Considering everything, Doomed was, everyone who worked on this seemed like really connected to it, except for maybe a couple of the key money dudes. But the Star Wars one is a little bit more like, it was a thing we did. It was a lark. But I think Doomed, there's a lot of sincerity to it, actually.
Not only is Doomed covers the many aspects of the original Fantastic Four film, but and all of which come through. One of them is downright passion and sincerity. That was what really the vibe around that film. For all the reasons we could discuss today.
Yeah.
Everybody really meant it to do the best possible film they could. And then the story, unlike the Star Wars Christmas special, which was sort of like, well, it's just like,
not much of a story.
Put that on your way. This one has the story is kind of phenomenal in a way, and that we're sitting here today, 30 years later, to talk about it and to talk about what even is the future of this film is extraordinary.
Yeah, and I think that the most important thing for the story that's told in this version of the Fantastic Four, and I'm sure anybody who's watching us speak right now who hasn't seen it, if you're watching us, you're on YouTube. So they're probably right next to this video. It's recommended. Doomed, you can watch on Freevee through Amazon, which I did. So you can watch all of this stuff and find out more about what we're talking about. You don't have to spend $20 for a VHS. And most of you probably don't have anything to play a VHS on. So
or a DVD.
Right, exactly. So, and I think that it's the story of the first... of the film is really basically the first issue of Fantastic Four and a little bit more. I mean, it's I think Doctor Doom's introduced in issue 5. It's the origin of how it happens, which is like, well, this is what I want to see. And they tell the story in that way. And the interesting thing about later versions of the Fantastic Four that have tremendous budgets and in both cases, very talented performers in the cast. The most recent one with Miles Teller, Kate Mara, and Michael B. Jordan is still to this day one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, how did they get this so wrong? Yeah. You know, they had at their disposal all these materials. Your film had very little at its disposal, and it told the Fantastic Four story. And,
verbatim.
Yeah.
And with the exact spirit of the comic book, which is what we get year after year, is people saying, I don't know how you guys did it, because the thing is, your film embodies, you know, the original 1962 comic. You know, it's like it has the spirit, the characters, it has the kind of pathos that the comics had. And why could no one else with much more money ever duplicate that?
You know, well, watching it, and for me, like, by the way, my first...
I was going to actually ask
eBay.
Oh.
I think it was, and I'm going to say...
We didn't have eBay in 1995.
No, we did not. But when I bought it in whatever year eBay first kicked around...
You found out about eBay, and the first thing you typed in, Fantastic Four, Roger Corman.
It might not have been the first, but it was probably my first 5. And Star Wars Holiday Special, by the way, probably also in there. And so I'm watching it on YouTube, and or... unnamed website where I found this legally, and it actually looked a lot better because you know what we had, dub of a dub of a dub. Yeah. And for our digital audience, that means when you record something and re-record, and so to see it actually a lot more clearly than I've ever seen it was
There's
great.
reasons for that too, of course, which is that in the first decade after we'll get into the story of the unrelease of this film. Which is really what it's about. When we got past VHS, other copies got out. I know there were 3/4 inch tapes that some of us had. I won't say who. Don't say it's me, but some of us had. And they found their way out to people who were, let's just say, possibly editors at large corporations that were in a position to dupe those 3/4 inch and start turning out DVDs, which is, you know, when we saw that came in the late 90s, early 2000s, you saw there's DVDs at Comic-Cons and on eBay. And those got better and better.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, the film Doomed, the documentary about it, actually has an image of what the mass-produced, you know, copy after copy after copy and how pixelated they could look. And I was like, I wish mine looked as good as that, what they showed, but it didn't look great. But yeah, it's true. The version that however you come about finding it now. And usually I'm going to be one of the last people that urge people to, you know, find something through clandestine methods. But we're talking about one of the things that was intentionally not released. This is the only way you can get it. So you want to have a better looking image, you know, and I think that, you know, getting to see it and seeing it earlier this week, looking better than I ever saw it before was it was a nice.
And herein lies, you know, the topic for today, really, which is not only this film not only exists, but you know we need to look at what has happened around this film from 1994 when it was pulled back from its release for a lot of reasons. And looking now 30 years later, it's like, well, do any of those reasons even hold water anymore?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is my position right now. It's like Marvel Studios is the biggest studio in the world.
Yeah, well, especially because it's part of Disney,
It's part of Disney. It's the MCU. It's they have done and will do whatever they want, and there is in no way does this first, I'll call it, origin film of the Fantastic Four in any way compromise what is now Marvel Studios.
Yeah.
If at that time when Marvel, we have to look back 30 years and we have to say, oh, Marvel actually didn't quite know where it was going to go. It didn't know how. Everybody wanted it to be as big as it is today, but no one knew how it was going to happen. And so the guy that held on to the rights to the Fantastic Four decided, we should not show this film. He retained his rights by law because he had produced and made a film. And therefore he could, vie to make a large, big budget version, which didn't happen, as you might note, for 13 years.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
So it was like, you could have released the original Fantastic Four, released and done and gone to DVD or VHS and still had your big budget version. Anyway.
Yeah, but no, and then that's the interesting thing, because I think what it comes down to is, as it has come to light in the years since, that the idea of producing this film was basically to hold on to the rights. And it had to go into production at, what was it, the end of 92 or 93?
92.
Yeah, it had to go into production, and there was a very quick turnaround. The actors are talking about how quickly they were cast, and they're like, great, we'll see you in 2 weeks, all this kind of stuff. And again, it's very well detailed in that documentary, Doomed, that I highly recommend. But ultimately, the people who knew, and it's arguable depending on who was speaking in the documentary, some feel even Roger Corman didn't know. It was just like, can you get us a movie cheap? And for anyone who knows Roger Corman's work, he can always get you a film, and he can always get it to you cheap.
And always find a way to release it.
Yeah,
like
that's
Roger
true.
Corman, for years, Miramax would sit on a lot of films. They wouldn't release. We're dealing with this now with Warner Brothers with Batgirl, but like Corman, everything they make, they would release.
Yeah, it's famously said, there's only one movie that Roger Corman never released.
Yeah,
The Fantastic Four. And it wasn't by choice. It was by, a deal.
His partnership, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
even,
we were going to release it. We were traveling the country. We were promoting.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the interesting thing.
And like out of pocket, too, right?
Some of us, I know Alex Hyde White, who played Reed Richards, and Michael Bailey Smith, Ben Grimm, did a lot of, barnstorming around the country, and we're going to, do it and really put their heart and soul into the release of the film. And then it was, it was shelved. They couldn't do it.
Yeah, and in the documentary, who's the actor who played Ben Grimm? You said his name. Michael Bailey Smith.
Yeah.
And he said, like, I was out like $12,000, but I'd definitely do it again. Like, he doesn't have the regrets, he was like
incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, he really meant it, and so did Alex. He really felt this is the beginning of something.
Yeah.
In his career, and for some of the others. He really wanted to go for it, as an actor should, if they feel they have that kind of opportunity. And so there's the bittersweet piece of it, which is that, something that we really put a lot of work into. I mean, what does an actor or director want?
Yeah.
They want their work to be seen, and it wasn't.
Right.
The irony is the other part of our story.
Yes, which we have to, of course, focus on that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, yes, even 30 years ago, a film with $1 million budget, everyone has to put in so much more effort than a film that has, a $400 million budget, So it definitely, you can tell from the way everybody talks about it and sort of the fond memories. So we'll talk about what happened in a moment, but I think it's interesting how it comes to you that you get to play Dr. Doom. And how familiar were you with Victor Von Doom before you even read the script?
So what I know is this. I know that I grew up in many ways, inspired to be an actor, but from various sources. And probably the largest one of all, which is my father, who was quite a famous actor.
For being on I Spy, amongst other things.
Greatest American Hero. And my dad had a great love of comic books. Many people don't know this, but he actually was going to be a comic book artist because he was a really good graphic artist before he went on the stage and went, "Oh, I guess I'm going to be an actor."
And he was a writer too,
he was
right?
A prolific writer and a director. And so I grew up with a guy who was like sci-fi, monster movies, universal horror. These things were fed to me as a child, and I ate them up. I was just that was my geek joy of being a fan of these films. I lived them and slept them and dreamed them, And when Lon Chaney Sr., for example, was like a great, just mesmerized by the photos of him doing Hunchback and Phantom, and so like all of that's going on. I become an actor in my professionally by my very early 20s. And I'm doing, episodic, and I'm doing some feature films and some, low budget, indie films. And along comes this, thing from my agent. Like I said, the Fantastic Four. I mean, first of all, that's probably the only comic I really cared about.
Sure.
I mean, I liked other comics, but if the one that was really stood out to me, and I can see it on the rack at a little dime store in Sherman Oaks, where there were like, I'd come home from school and I'd be looking at Fantastic Four. It had four superheroes. They all had weird traits, one, it stood out. And one is fire, one is rock, one stretches, one goes invisible. They're a family somehow. So it always spoke to me, that show, that comic. And when I saw that this is being produced by whom? And I went, Roger Corman. I'm a big fan of Corman films because I'm a real, film student and everything. Attack of the Crab Monsters? Are you kidding me? Little Shop of Horrors?
I've seen most Roger Corman movies mostly because of the show Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Of course,
the wealth that Corman provided that show.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank goodness.
Yeah.
And so all of that, I'm staring at this thing going, and I'm supposed to play Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom, how do I know? I reminded of it, but I couldn't quite place it. I was like, he's something. I know he's like somebody. I see something in my mind's eye. So I run down to the comic book store and I'm like, aha, Dr. Doom.
Right.
Got it. Got it. He's pre-Darth Vader.
Exactly, yeah.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
I mean, there is nothing before Dr. Doom of a supervillain encased in armor, essentially, with a mask. But in a very grandiose kind of, super medieval style because of where he comes from, with a cape and a hood. So I went, okay, I'm the guy for this.
Yeah.
I don't know what Roger Corman thinks he's going to do. How do you make the Fantastic Four if you're Roger Corman? Up to that point, we had seen some superhero films were coming. I mean, we had Batman, which was fabulous.
Yeah, the Tim Burton Batman would be 1989. That was phenomenal. It's referenced in the documentary Doomed that the most recent Marvel property was the Matt Salinger 1990 Captain America, which was, I don't think people were as invested in it emotionally. It
went straight to video.
It did go straight to video, yeah, and
low budget.
It has a degree of charm to it, but yeah, the any success for Marvel was really in the future. I mean, at this point, there was an X-Men animated series and a Spider-Man animated series, but they were just starting,
and they were still mostly focused on animation.
Right.
And I side note, I narrated a 8-part documentary called Icons Unearthed Marvel last year because they tagged me and said, do you want to talk about the Fantastic Four movie? And, would you narrate this, please?
Yeah.
And it's the whole history of MCU. And
great. At
that time, remember, Marvel they didn't have a clear plan of how to do it.
Yeah.
This is Avi Arad is there. It's pre-Kevin Feige, they weren't sure. So I thought, hey, they're going to do Fantastic Four. I don't know. I'm doing it. And I go in as Dr. Doom. I remember I put on a big oilskin duster, an Australian Outback duster, and I locked it all up like that. And I thought, well, it's kind of like a very, very bold sort of statement, like a suit of armor. And And I said, he's got to be big. I know he's got to be big. This. Look at this guy in this comics. He's a tyrant. He's operatic. He is absolutely, all powerful. That's how he sees himself. So I went in and, just threw it to the wind. And Oli Sasson, this wonderful director, said, "It's great. Can you do it again? And even more."
I love that.
I'm your man. Because, and that was the irony is that, especially at that time, most trained actors at that time, I come out of the theater, I have a lot of theater experience. You're trying to be in movies very natural and very, whatever real you think is. And this is not that. This is a hyper real. This is real, exponential. And so he encouraged me to do that. And that began our journey. Before I knew it, I was cast as Dr. Doom.
Right. And I think that that's what the character calls for in the story. That's kind of what Doom should be.
That's his ego.
Yeah,
right?
That's who he is.
Biggest ego in all.
He's a narcissist.
Yeah.
He's complete and utter,
And it's interesting you mentioned Darth Vader because I was thinking about when I was going to get to talk to you, I was thinking about, obviously, somewhat infamously, the performer for Darth Vader in those films is an actor named David Prowse, and James Earl Jones did the voiceover. But he still had to move around on the set and all of that. And you're dressed like Dr. Doom, acting with this mask on, and one of the great performance was Dark Knight Rises, where Tom Hardy is Bane, and he has a mask over his face the entire movie, but it's only the lower part. You can still express with your eyes. So you're in this getup that I can't imagine what
you can't imagine
that soundstage on the West Side.
And on that end, I kind of want to imagine what was it like being in that outfit.
The two threads go together here. It's like, okay, once I had the role, I was like, great, I'm gonna get to act my heart out. This will be really great. I can be scary, I can be funny, I can be a bit sexy in my own way, whatever. Most people don't think Dr. Doom's sexy. Let me tell you, I think he's got some appeal there.
I'm sure,
maybe a little bit of BDSM, but
there's an audience out there for it, I'm sure.
He has something going on.
Only Dooms.
Only Doom. And there's moments.
50 Shades of Doom.
50 Shades of Doom is a movie that I personally would endorse. And if you look at the performance, you'll see little shades of it where I could throw it in. The point is, then came the reality. Oh my God, I'm going to be acting in a suit, in a suit of armor, from head to toe with a mask. I get to do Victor in the beginning, and I have some opportunity to say this was a real guy. He had feelings. He had some darkness and intensity and all that. But most of the film, I'm going to be clanking around.
Yeah.
And I thought I've got to really get my A game going here on being ultra physical, which is something that Darth Vader did not. They did not do that.
Yeah.
He is much more subtle in that sense, and they let the voice do most of the acting. But in my case, I knew it was me behind the mask, and I was going to have to, use it like the way we see Doom in these incredible artwork, and how he would point, raise his arms, and be final and pompous about things. And I said, I've got to really think of it like a mime in a certain way, like what are those gestures that he did? And then have a voice to go with it. And then they put me in the suit. And let me tell you, man, it was like this just became more real than I could ever thought. I mean, I was practicing all my stuff in a theater. I was really working out. Now I've got to deal with this. So I'm hot. That's the first thing. Within 30 seconds, you're schwitzing. It's like, it's coming out. And because I had to wear a bodysuit under it with lots of Velcro attachments, so all the pieces could go on. It's every move, is restricted, so it's not fluid. It's going to be So I'm breathing into my own space. I'm sweating from head to toe, and within a short amount of time, I'm aggravated.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is aggravating, this is frustrating. And I just observed when that was happening, I went, okay, the only thing you can do is what every good acting teacher would tell you is like, use it. Use your aggravation. Use how annoying this is. Use how much you hate it. And funnel it into these scenes with the people that, Reed Richards, who you hate and you envy and and the desire to absolutely destroy things. I wanted to destroy when I was in this suit because I was felt like I was dying.
Yeah.
And they're just wearing spandex.
So I get to wear spandex.
They're even angrier at them.
They're in super sexy spandex outfits, all nice and blue. So it you could say this is a case where the real actor is in the real suit and he really is pissed.
Yeah.
And and then take it where you can, so now be imaginative and getting prompts from Oli's, that's from the director, saying more like, like do it like a tyrant, like a fascist dictator, like Mussolini,
Yeah, I saw you say that in the documentary, and then I was remembering the way that he folded his arms. Exactly.
That was his move.
And so, all right, so you talked a little bit about in the documentary, but how good was the recording of your dialogue with that mask on? You had talked about that you were willing to do looping, the additional dialogue recording. You would do that for everything, but they didn't ask you to do the entire film, right?
So it's a combination of problems there, which is that, of course, I thought, well, I hope they're getting good sound on all this.
Yeah.
But most likely, I could end up looping most of this because, it really is a mask. It's really on there. And I think once they tried sticking some like mics up in there, and it didn't quite work, I think. And so they boomed most of it. They just boom mic. And I thought, well, this is a fix it in post kind of a deal, but I'm going to give the performance that I can. And so it was a combination. Oli said, he says, but your performance, I loved it so much that I didn't want to change it. I thought it's okay that the voice is in a mask. He is in a mask.
Yeah.
As long as, it's mixed well enough, it's going to be fine. Well, that's a tricky question, especially in 1993 or for when it was posted, because, I dare say there are instruments today that could take the masked voice and do all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
And
Not then.
Not then. So he said, some stuff, we're going to need. So I got there to do my looping session and it wasn't all the scenes. And I was really pissed. I go, well, what about all the rest of the scenes? I got to fix that stuff. I know it. They go, no, this is all and part of that was also probably budgetary.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, they could have hired me for a second day. That's money.
Yeah.
I don't know all the reasons, but it was a confluence of Oli saying, I only really need these scenes. And it was a point that we never quite agreed on. I was kind of like, we should have done them all. So I've always said, to this day, I stand behind the performance and Oli's choices also. But you could either, one, remix the film, which I'm, talking about now.
Yeah.
Like, why not do a restoration on this film? And you could pull out all the Doom stuff that feels a little bit muffled, a little wonky. Or I'd happily go in and re-record some of the stuff, because there's a distinct difference if you listen to the film when Doom is, first meeting the Fantastic Four. Like, I know I didn't loop that scene. So it's very much, he's in the mask. He goes, well, welcome to my, kingdom. And it's not clear like that.
Yeah.
And then there's like some of the end sequences, like when I'm hanging on the castle, and we loop those and they're perfect, So it's, it's wishful thinking.
Well,
I was going to say with regards to sort of clean sound, it's interesting because this has come up recently, even with Christopher Nolan.
Mm-hmm.
When it came up with Bane, and you remember like they did like the first scene of Dark Knight Rises, and we could not understand Bane.
Right,
and he always talked about, it's like, well, similar kind of thing, the idea of performance, it's okay not to hear everything. That's always been his argument. But to your point, like, there is a notable difference between moments in this where you know, I don't mind as a viewer, like when I don't hear every word, but when it gets in the way, that's a thing.
Of course, that's always what it is.
And
as soon as it's compromised and it's sticking out, it halts up your viewing experience.
Well, it calls attention to itself instead of what we want our attention to, which is boom,
which is the performance. That's right.
So you give the performance. Everyone in the cast gives the performance. It's done, and there's expectations for it. I want to make sure we get plenty of time to talk about what your hopes are for the future. But take a moment and sort of summarize, basically after it wraps, the next couple years of so what's happening with this film? Yeah.
Well, as I said, the run up to the day of the bad news, and they pulled the plug.
Yeah.
Was a continual building wave. It was a wave of goodwill, a wave of excitement. By fall of '93, we were going to Comic-Cons. The cast, they were showing the trailer, signing autographs, doing interviews. There was a lot of good feeling about this. And I was feeling like, hey, this could be something. I get this in some theaters, I might get another job out of it.
Yeah.
Who knows where this will go? And then and I don't know if it was around Christmas or just after. I want to say it was in the new year of '94, somewhere in like February. That's when Ole called me and said, I got bad news. They're not releasing it. Although everybody was stunned.
Yeah.
We were all like, what? Why? And he couldn't really explain.
Yeah.
He said there's other deals going on with the property. There's something. But even Ole didn't quite understand. He got a nice apologia from Roger Corman saying, sorry, kiddo. Even Bernd Eichinger, the German producer who did buy back the film from Corman and shelved it, apologized to Ole and gave him a job on something else.
Right.
But nobody would really come out with what the story was all about. And so I didn't really get it until quite a while later, at least for me personally. And I would say at least 2 or 3 years later, where I was like, so what was the whole reason for this? And I don't have much memory of that because I had to shelve it. I had to say, this doesn't make sense. This is very disappointing. I am putting it away and I'm focusing on my career, such as it is, and going forward, because that's what actors have to do. But then, I think maybe I talked to Ole, or maybe I got a little more pieces of the whole puzzle. That in fact, there was a contractual rights obligation. It was fulfilled. The guy had an opportunity to do the thing with Fox, to do a big budget version, and so it was pulled. So I was, I won't say I was just heartbroken, but I was definitely a little wounded, and I didn't let it affect my life, but, it went on. And then gradually the joy started returning when, let's say 10 years later, this film has probably already outpaced the Star Wars Christmas special in terms of bootlegging, in terms
I would say so.
Viewership,
in terms of watchability
and goodwill,
and for good reasons. 20 years later, it's like fully like a classic film. 30 years later, it's a piece of film history, which is why I think we're talking.
The argument that I think was made in Doomed was like, it's like the most famous bootleg of all time.
It's without, I stand behind it.
Yeah, I can't think of anything close. I mean, again, you bring up the holiday special, but that actually wasn't a bootleg that aired on television.
This is a true bootleg that went, through what I would say the comic underground, which is what we were for years and years, until we became mainstream.
Yeah.
Let's face it, in the 90s, you could say comic book conventions and all that. It was still a little bit And then when superhero movies really blasted, and Marvel particularly,
And there was money in it.
and there's money, it's like comic book culture is mainstream.
Yeah, I mean the
geeks
San
that have it.
Diego Comic-Con, like comic is basically in air quotes at this point. It's a lot of like movies and TV, and a lot of them are of course based on comic books, but so much other stuff just ended
Way
there.
beyond.
So, and in the documentary, there's sort of the conversation. I think it might even be Oli who says it. There was an idea of like, it could have been a bonus disc and a DVD set when that was the business model. Now it's like, why not be an extra on Disney Plus, in some way for people to see it. But what specifically is it that you, Joseph, want to happen? And I want to give you as much time as you'd like to kind of explain that.
Well, yeah, thank you. A few weeks ago, I basically went, tiny viral, with a statement of it's 30 years anniversary of the unrelease of the Fantastic Four. I contend that now it is time to actually release it because of some things we've already spoken about, which is this film has now reached a level of not only the fandom around it is prodigious, and there is a kind of I recognize it, I think, as a part of film history now, comic book history, film, whatever you want to call it, and that it's never really had an official release seems really a shame at this point. It's certainly, there's no downside to Marvel anymore. If there was one 30 years ago, why they didn't want to show it, that doesn't exist anymore. Now what you've got are legions of fans. And you've got, because I think a couple months ago was first the news came out, new Fantastic Four film is coming.
Yes.
Pedro Pascal's playing Reed Richards. So we've got, a cast lined up and people are excited. And I said, you know what? Now is the time to see the first Fantastic Four. Why? Because of a couple of things. One, it would be a great marketing, campaign, I think, for Marvel to say, here was the original, here's the latest. And it would whet everyone's appetite. I could see people saying, wow, the original Fantastic Four, I can actually stream it now. It's got maybe we have special features on it. We can show some interviews, whatever. And it would certainly be wonderful as a build-up to the next new Fantastic Four that hopefully is going to be the game changer. Because as I submit in an open letter to Marvel Studios, that what we've got on our hands is a curse. Maybe Dr. Doom is saying that, as he did come from a gypsy culture. But there's been a kind of curse over the Fantastic Four franchise. The first film was shelved and not seen.
Right.
I believe that is kind of a blind spot in the system of the Fantastic Four film franchise.
It's the Red Sox trading Babe Ruth to the Yankees.
Or the GOAT.
Oh, the GOAT in
with
Chicago.
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
Even more so.
Okay.
I'll
go with that.
The tavern owner tried to bring his goat to a Cubs game.
And it was denied admittance, right?
And he swore that was what they were never going to win the World Series.
You don't let a bunch of actors and creatives make a film with your heart and soul and say, sorry guys, and get away with it.
Right.
I think, even though we did nothing, I submit too that the fans were disappointed. And there was almost a kind of weird distrust that you could say is generational. This is the theory I have. And then you've got, 2005?
I think 2005 was the one with Jessica Alba.
Then we start, finally, 13 years later, that we see big budget versions coming out. There's one after there's one.
There's two
one
with that cast, the Silver Surfer. Yeah.
And many fans felt, kind of, middling on all that. It didn't go over the moon in terms of box office success or even, a kind of creative achievement, because it didn't represent what many felt was the original Fantastic Four. it tried to make it super cool, which is something I've always contended with. Is like, yeah, the thing is, when you make everybody kind of cynical and having one-liners and cool, it kind of takes away from the original spirit of this comic. And that's what I think, they went for there. That was the style of the time.
Yeah, they were basically trying to recreate the X-Men, which that worked to put them in the black leather and have it be a little bit, because those characters were suited to that. I don't believe that the Fantastic Four are cynical and,
But also they're a family. That's the thing that I feel like all those movies since yours, never really got their arms around. And what your movie really did was the four of you seem to genuinely like each other. Yeah. You guys have chemistry together, and those other movies, there's good actors in them.
Yeah,
and no one gives a bad performance, but they don't have you don't feel anything between them, and that's
there you go. And whatever, with whatever tiny budget we have, we pulled that off. Right. You watch that film, and I have watched it, luckily, with an audience once in St. Louis. They screened it, at a con.
They didn't tell the mouse that they did that, I'm sure.
We deny any knowledge of this screening.
That was actually before the...
Oh, okay. Makes it a little easier. Yeah.
But there were no tickets sold.
Yeah.
It was just like...
That's perfect.
This is a bootleg. People like to watch it. We're all going, we just happened to be 100 people. Yeah. We're going to watch it.
What a coincidence. We're all here in this theater.
Fabulous. People were laughing and clapping and going for the full ride. And with all the tongue-in-cheek humor, with the sort of, kind of anachronistic 60s sort of humor, everyone just ate it up.
Yeah.
And so when I think today, it's like, what happened? Then there was the second one, Silver Surfer, also not a huge fan favorite. And then the 2015, as you said, most people feel is unmentionable.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
Not until I saw Madam Web had I ever seen a worse movie in the theater.
Oh, right.
But that's
your lips. Your lips to Marvel Studios. Yeah. So the thing is, it's like, what if there was, that's just a theory. Like, what if there's something to be cleared up here?
Yeah.
What if there's some, blind spot that needs light shown on it? And that will free the Fantastic Four franchise for great success. And it sounds like a crazy, kind of theory from some crazy actor who was involved in that film. But there's something about it that I think has merit, that you need to finally release the past. You see this in film stories and in novels. There's something about, releasing that which was held back that is going to free up the future. So for lots of reasons, I wrote up an open letter, submitted it to be seen by Marvel Studios, and I've gone public with saying, release the Fantastic Four 1994. And this is a campaign, and we have a petition. And most of the other cast and everyone associated with it are totally behind it. They're like, the director, Oli Sasson, the writer, Craig Nevius, screenwriter, he's like, yeah, we're kind of a classic film now. It's like everybody knows it, and Marvel needs to kind of step up and say, okay, here it is. And sure, maybe it's just a streaming on Disney. Maybe there's a Blu-ray that people could collect. And that's really...
But, and we do live in an age where, fan support goes a long way. Obviously, Star Trek was famously saved from cancellation multiple times on NBC back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. But we now have a very similar situation to this in the sense that, that we had... Zack Snyder he did the Justice League, and then they replaced him as a director, and then the version that came out nobody was happy with. Then they let him do his version of it, which, boy, they spent a lot of money on that. We can talk about the end result of that, but the fact is, there's the only reason that happened is people were like, we'd really like to see that. And, and even if it's like, it would be great, let's get you to do some new voiceovers. Maybe you can, do a little bit of VFX, at probably little cost, but also you could also not and just put it out. Let people see it either way. Yeah.
I have two ways to lift the curse. One is just to officially release it, period, as it is. The second would be give it some upgrades. Why not? The technology is there now that you could, just give a remastering of the whole thing and add some VFX, but absolutely you don't need to do it. it's a classic in its own right, from the way it was rendered, the way Ole Sasson worked with what he had to make that story as strong as it is. And then I guess the second or third, way to also lift the curse is, why not make it part of the multiverse?
Yeah.
In some distant referential way, you could pull in a fiber or two from that film. And Kevin Feige went on record to say that.
Yeah, I was going to say that even the Matt Salinger Captain America, it's considered like, it exists somewhere in the multiverse. Yes, that actually happened. Yes, the Red Skull looked like that, for better or for worse. That's what he looked like. So there's no reason to, because in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, we have a Reed Richards, played by John Krasinski. And he's not going to be in the movie. So
he got turned into spaghetti after about a minute.
Okay, yeah, that's true. It didn't go well for him.
Yeah, but there's plenty of other Reed Richards floating around there.
What's
and Spider-Man No Way Home, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got versions of everybody.
They had all three of the Spider-Men. So what's the best way for people to find the petition? The petition.
The petition.
Yeah, the petition for the petition.
There is a petition. And I invite everyone to go to Facebook. Hopefully you're on Facebook. It's around on Twitter as well. And probably on Instagram too, but I launched this mostly on Facebook because a lot of fans are there. There is Fantastic4.net.
Okay,
That's a website that's dedicated to this.
Yeah,
Fantastic4, number 4.
Okay.
.net. The hashtag, which will also take you there, is Release Fantastic4. The words 94.
Okay.
The numeral.
And we'll use our account, and I'll tweet it myself. I'm on Twitter at ChristianDMZ. So
the petition's on change.org.
Right.
Too,
okay. So and look, here's the thing. If somebody will Google Fantastic Four petition, it'll come up.
Oh, yeah.
That's the easiest way to do it. I know we only have a couple more minutes, so I want to talk to you about a couple other things very quickly. When I was reading through some of the other work you had done, it was a light bulb that went on over my head. My wife for years worked on Mad Men. She was the assistant to Matthew Weiner, and then she was able to write an episode in the final season. You played Don Draper, aka Dick Whitman, his birth name. You played his father in the
Archie Whitman.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that. Sort of, one of those iconic characters in movie history. You don't have to rank him, but he's up there with Tony Soprano and Archie Bunker, and one of the greats. Don Draper is amazing. Yeah.
Became is now a part of iconic TV history and long form series shows. What a show. Wonderful. Didn't know that you're.
Yeah, I decided I would not tell you via email. I wanted to mention in the interview.
Beautiful. Matt Weiner, quite a genius in his own way.
Yeah.
He wanted this. Nobody would listen to him. And then he got a job on Sopranos, and that kind of gave him a little leverage finally. But apparently he had this in his pocket for years.
He'd written it, I think, a decade before they shot the pilot, I believe. Yeah.
So there's two long causes.
Great point.
You want something to happen, keep petitioning. It might happen. And one of those great stories, I was called in to play this role, this hard-hearted, alky farmer kind of guy. And I remember it was one of those things. The audition was really horrible. I think I went down at the wrong time, and they said, "Oh, you're not here till the afternoon." I'm like, "Oh no." And I had to drive home, come back later the afternoon, and now it's packed wall to wall with actors.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to be here. It's hot.
There's 20 guys who all kind of look like you.
They're all different.
Oh, okay.
They're but normally they look kind of like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, this guy, a big guy, he's a farmer. You're gonna take him, And I went in, and I read the scene, and Matt Weiner was there, and Laura Schiff, who was the casting director of the Fantastic Four.
That's right.
One of her very first jobs back in '92.
Right.
She was working for Roger. And there she was again, and had called me in and I said, well, hello, Laura. It's been a while. And I did my grim, Archie Whitman working on an engine or something. And I remember starting. I had the audacity, I guess, to start the audition with my back to the camera.
Oh, interesting.
Because he's supposed to be working on something. If I was shooting it, I'd have the guy like working, and you don't see him for a bit.
Yeah.
And I was talking like that, and I go, "Why doesn't he turn around?" Finally, someone says something, and I turned around. What is it you want? You know, and it was this hobo character who would come to the farm. You know, and I was so disgusted with the day and the afternoon, and feeling, you know, one of the actors in a bad mood. Walked out. I literally crumpled up the script and the sides and threw it in the trash. And walked out saying, "Oh God, I don't need this aggravation," you know. And then a couple of days later, she said, "They want to make you an offer."
And you're like, you know what? Okay, I guess.
Well, okay. I guess I will.
I guess the key is to make sure you're irritated when giving a performance.
Be what you are. Be what you are, and
use it, right?
And
use your frustration.
Use it.
Lesson of the day.
Be what you are. Use it, and also let it go. It's the old let it go.
Two other quick
things. Throw away
things.
the trash.
Eric, I know you noticed a Marvel connection, a historical figure that he played. Go ahead and ask him about that.
Well, actually, I'll make it a double.
Right.
So, what was it like for you getting back into the Marvel universe with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as, by the way, nonetheless, major character, FDR.
Yeah.
FDR.
Not a small role by any stretch.
No.
And then, also, I was curious, too, you did Apollo 13 like a year after doing Fantastic Four.
Boy, what a difference.
It's a little different.
Yeah, I know. When I saw that, I told Christian, I'm like, my God, you went from, they cut every corner they could on Fantastic Four, then you go to something where whatever you need.
Where I'm just part of, you know, one of the guys. In
a very
13,
large machine.
In a very large, you know, mission control. Wonderful film. Was grateful to be part of it. I just had my first kid. I was like, the money was, you know, studio, you know, job. But literally, you know, a year before, I was, you know, the villain star of all time. You couldn't get any bigger in size anyway. And now my role was just like, you're just part of. There's not a lot you have to do here. Just, you know, be a sincere kind of, you know, regular guy
on a film whose line in the budget for just lunch was more than the budget for Fantastic. I don't mean all of the food, just lunch.
Just lunch was larger than the entire budget of Fantastic Four. But great experiences, you know, for an actor on his journey, which is, you know, some days you get to play, you know, Zeus or, you know, Hades or whatever, and some days you're just the guy showing up, you know, carrying the spear, so to speak, and that is how it goes.
So to be FDR,
sometimes you get to be FDR.
What did you
do? In a Marvel property.
Yeah, in a Marvel property.
Marvel call me back after all these years. They didn't. I mean, it happened at the level of casting, of course.
Yeah.
Nobody was saying, "Hey, let's go get Joseph Culp to play FDR." It came my way, casting, and I walked in and I said, FDR, okay, I can do an FDR, I guess. And I also was on my way back to Europe at that moment, where I lived part-time. And I also, it's another good case of where you didn't really expect it to happen. It was like, well, they need an FDR. I don't know, there's a lot of those guys around. But I had, you know, whatever I have, you know, some kind of access to those, you know, kind of characters. You know, maybe they're a little larger. And I got on a plane and went to Germany, and then I got a call saying they want you to do the FDR, and I went, oh, I got to come back. Okay, happy. Yeah. And I remember doing like sizes and stuff on the phone from Europe, and then I came back, and it was a pure pleasure, and to be FDR, to work with Greg,
yeah, of course,
who was a big fanboy of FDR as Coulson. And it was just really nice. And it was like, so they let me back after all.
Yeah.
You know, after all those years.
Yeah. And then the very final thing, it jumped out. You, I guess, you didn't appear, but you contributed to an episode of New Girl as the voice of Mick Jagger. And I don't know of an actor who has been both Mick Jagger And FDR.
I've been Mick Jagger, and I've been FDR. You know, playing with voices. Been doing it since I was little, and that was funny. You never see Mick in that episode. You see my hands coming out and feeding stuff, but you know, to the one of the girls there. But very strange role, but they even made me up a bit, like kind of did my hair, and I wanted to wear a cool jacket, and I was in spirit of Mick. You know? So some interesting roles over the years for sure. But.
Yeah, and then I did notice that something you did actually came out earlier this year, which was you were a sheriff in something called Outlaw Posse, and I mentioned that because it was written, directed, and starred Mario Van Peebles, Whoopi Goldberg, Cedric the Entertainer, Edward James Olmos, and you know, just and William Mapother, who people know from a more famous relative of his. But I just and I saw that, and I was like, oh, that literally just came out, and
just had a premiere in February.
Yeah.
And it's a revisionist Western. You know, Mario Van Peebles, quite an amazing talent, very good friend also. Wrote, directed, starred. It is, you know, he made Posse back in, I think, 90.
Sounds right.
Which is widely regarded one of the first, you know, kind of all black Westerns in a way of the modern era. And Outlaw Posse follows up on it. And it's a retelling of history and the issues of racism in this country. And it really it makes a powerful statement. And yes, I was called in to do the sheriff, and I got some licks in there. I wore a beard.
Nice.
Beard coming on, and his pipe, and a hat, and I was instant, you know, Montana sheriff, you know, there it was.
Well, Joseph Culp, it's been wonderful chatting with you. Could easily do another hour, but I want to make sure that everybody knows. So that you said fantastic. The number4.net is a great one-stop shop to find everything. And
also, hashtag Fantastic 4 release Fantastic 494 is another way to access all this. And please sign the petition if you care about the Fantastic Four film and would love to see it have a release.
Yeah.
I think we make our voices heard. I think the fans at this point have a lot of power. They always have.
Yeah, sure.
And they have more power now than ever to determine the fate of things. And I think we can gather together and say, come on, we want that film to be available to everybody.
Yeah.
It's got 3 generations looking at it now. There's going to be a 4th. Why not lift it to the next level? You know, it's had the mystique for 30 years.
Yeah.
Someone say, well, would you lose the mystique? I said, we've had the mystique. It's now just have it available.
Double down on mystique.
We'll double down. This will be the next level of that wonderful film. And if not for the film itself, just for film history. It's important that films don't get lost. And certainly not the
Fantastic Four. And I hope that people sign the petition. They can, of course, watch the film currently wherever they want to look for it, and can't recommend the documentary Doomed more highly. Eric Conner, where can people find you?
Well, Christian and I will actually be marching up and down Burbank Boulevard with sandwich boards, protesting release
right after this.
Doom commands
the 94 cut.
Doom commands you.
And also, where can you be found?
Oh, I guess also, if you want to not see me in person, Eric Conner over on X or on Instagram.
And as always, I'm at Christian DMZ, and we'll be back talking about X-Men 97 in our next episode. And make sure you like, subscribe, all the important things right here at Geekscape. Thank you so much. And as the great Stan Lee would say, someone who apparently visited the set a number of times of your film, Stan would say, Excelsior.
Here's to the future, my friends.